Hey everybody, it's Ted Prodromou. This is Epic Encore. And today we're going to talk about influence. I know there's a lot of ways you can think. When I think of influence, I think of those timeshare sales presentations where they're not influencing you, they're like holding you hostage till you buy. That's a whole different form of influence. But today I'm with my friend Elaina, who we met through the social media, what was it? The Sales and Marketing
Sales
Management
and marketing.
Magazine webinars. We've both done numerous webinars with them, and that's how we connected, and we've become really good friends. So welcome, Elaina.
Thank you, Ted, so much. I'm in Montreal, Canada, and you're in Northern California, which has a lovely place in my heart. This painting was done by me right in your neighborhood when I lived there. So
Like it.
that's why it's my background today.
So,
Anyway, hi everyone, and lovely to be here.
how did you get started in influence?
It's a great question, Ted. I've always been interested in sales, and I started very young in direct sales. I sold encyclopedias door to door in freezing cold Montreal when I was barely out of my teens, and I was a manager for Avon. And then I decided to go into advertising. And so I moved to New York City, where I worked for several big agencies. And I was in the advertising game, so to speak. And I learned, all the uh, overt and covert ways to influence consumers. But I really wasn't happy doing that. And so I went back to graduate school and I got a degree in organization development, which is kind of the sociology of organizations.
Hmm.
And and then I was a professor for a while in New Jersey. And I got very interested in teaching adults in companies with my company.
Hmm.
And my company at the time was called Success Strategies, and I did training and development. And I decided to weave together my business experience and what I now had some academic rigor, and I created a one-day web seminar called The Secrets of Influence.
Hmm.
And it was very crude at the beginning, but it was very, very popular. I was very lucky very early on to have clients like IBM, AT&T, American Express in New York, Merrill Lynch, Citibank, et cetera, et cetera. They were all there, right, in Manhattan.
Hmm.
Um, over the years, I have refined the program because I needed to kind of up my game, right? So I hired psychological, psychometric folks to enhance the little quiz that I had created so that it's now statistically valid and reliable.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. So yeah. So basically, how I created it is over time and painfully, and with a lot of feedback and alpha and beta changes. So, so it's now a very refined one-day program, which has been taught to executives and very many other levels in Fortune 100 companies. And I am proud to say that we've gotten, amazing feedback. And it has really helped people enhance their repertoire of interpersonal skills. And not surprisingly, it's very popular with salespeople.
Of course.
And because salespeople always want the extra edge.
Hmm.
What new trick can I learn to be better than the competition.
Right.
But surprisingly, it's also very popular with IT professionals.
Interesting.
Because what we found was that when I was working with IT&T, AT&T and IBM and others and companies in Silicon Valley, they had tons of these IT professionals, engineers, who were kind of an underserved population in terms of training and development. That is, that they always were kind of obliged to go to some technical training when there was a new technical iteration of their specialty. And if they became a manager, maybe they got sent to management training.
Right.
But some of them had never had really basic interpersonal training, which this is really. It's not that complicated.
Yeah.
It's so I found that engineers and IT people were hungry for this kind of topic, and it really enhanced their ability to uh, have agency, to
Yeah.
attend a meeting and get their ideas heard.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it's been very, very successful with that population.
Well, they're the extreme introverts. I,
Sorry.
they're extreme introverts. I was an IT guy for 20 years.
Oh, there you go. Not
They didn't want to talk
necessarily
to
all.
people, but they come to
Yeah,
fix the computer. They didn't say much.
right. And look at you. You're not an introvert anymore,
Right. So
right?
I was always really good at having conversations with people fixing their computers. And they really appreciated that because I told them, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I found.
They felt comforted by that.
Exactly. But most of the people just came in, they'd replace a part, and they'd leave and not even talk to the customer. And I would always call them back the next day. I would do like 8 to 10 service calls a day, and I would call them back in the morning. Hey, is everything still working? It would take a
So
little
that's
minute.
one example of creating relationships,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely.
So I was influencing them, I guess, building that relationship, and I didn't even know it.
Well, that's the thing. Interesting you mentioned that, Ted, because most people, if you've gotten to a certain level of where you are in your life and your career, you're probably an okay influencer or even a good one, and you may not know it. And what our program does is to help people. The first phase is awareness. So you learn by using the influence styles inventory, which is that enhanced questionnaire that I mentioned.
Hmm.
And it's not like other assessments like DISC or the Myers-Briggs, because it measures um, those skills and that posture that you use when you're in the state of attempting to influence someone. And so you get your influence profile. Ted, I think you can edit this out. I have to clear my throat.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. You definitely don't want that on the recording. I've been talking, so I get hoarse. Okay. So people take the questionnaire and learn what their influence profile is over a spectrum of 6 different influence styles. So back to what you said about you probably were influencing and you weren't aware of it. That's exactly what people say. Like, I've been doing this all along, and now I understand that if I just revert to my default style, I'm limiting myself. And now I see that there are 5 other different strategies I could try.
Hmm.
If only I had known that they existed. Okay, so now that I do, I can practice them, right? Because each style is a cluster of skills.
these are
That's all
things I'd
about.
love to have learned when I was raising my children, but we didn't know.
There you go. In a way, someone wrote a book about love languages. And in a way, this is a similar concept. And let me explain that. So you may test to be very high in a particular style. I'll give you an example, a little teaser. So one of the styles is called telling or analyst, which is typical of the IT people that we're talking about. So, or lawyers. So people who use that style, they like facts and figures.
Hmm.
They like evidence, right? And they want more and more information. Okay, so that's the way that, uh, like, let's say if you're an engineer, you might attempt to influence someone. But for me, I'm going to be bored silly and I'm going to glaze over
Right.
because what I want is a more emotional, like uh, exciting, shiny object. I want emotional visions of a brighter future.
Right.
That's another style. And number one, if you want to influence me, number one, you need to know that that's my preferred way of taking in information.
Hmm.
Right now, how are you going to know that?
Right.
Well, the first step is you're going to take the questionnaire yourself and understand that there are six styles. But even more important, believe it or not, there's something more important than you. Because most of us are very keen about these kinds of quizzes and questionnaires. Tell me more about me, right?
Mhm.
And that's interesting and the first step. But what this is really more designed to do is to help you use this spectrum of styles as a prism, like better radar, I call it,
Hmm.
as a way to um, have almost 3D glasses as a way for me to understand you and what your preferred style is. And it sounds complicated, but or you need some kind of ESP, but no. Once you understand the styles, it like there are cues that other people are sending you that were there all along. You just did not have the equipment to pick it up. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Like you're in outer space looking for a signal, and unless you have the right equipment, I mean, if you were an engineer, I would talk to you this way,
Yeah.
right? So um,
We
I've
did something
learned,
similar to this and when I worked at Cellular One in the early 90s, but we did it through the MBTI assessment. We
yeah,
all took them, and then all the people that worked for me took them. So then they would explain, like, Ted, when you talk to Susie and ask her to do something, she glazes over. But if you
exactly.
approach her like this, she's going to be responsive. Like, that was so eye-opening to me.
So eye-opening. And I have to say, we all stand on the shoulders. I'm an inventor. I created this. It's unique. I hold the trademark for Secrets of Influence globally, and it's been taught all over the world. Um, I've taught it in India, and in Jamaica and all over the US. And I have other people, influence partners, one in Mexico and Latin America. So it's been a very, very successful model. And what's exciting now, and I guess we should talk about the webinar we're going to do in the future. But what's exciting now is during COVID and for the year after, I worked with a team of, they're called educational technologists. And together we created a 12 module e learning version of the 1 day seminar.
Hmm.
So, it's something for the new for this new age that we're in. And it's virtual. It's in an e-learning platform using the best of adult learning techniques.
Hmm.
So we can say more about that later. So this was a very long answer to your first question.
That's okay. So one thing like I'm thinking like people think influence is a negative thing and persuasion. What's the difference between influencing and persuading someone to do something? Like a salesman, how do you get someone to
Okay.
buy?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have this concern that influence is manipulation.
Yeah.
And if you kind of in your psychology feel that, you're just not going to want to do it. You're not going to want to learn it because it's not a good thing, right?
Hmm.
And so I like to explain it this way. It has to do with intent and effect. So the intent is from my side, do I believe that I am giving you some education, that I'm teaching you something, that I'm enhancing your life by selling you this computer system or this seminar or this vacuum cleaner,
Hmm.
right? So, am I giving you value? Are my intentions honorable, right? And then the other side of it is the effect. So that was intent. And the effect is how is it over there on your side? Do you feel used or had or exploited? Or do you feel that it was an aha moment or
Right.
that you learned something or that I enhanced your life or your learning? Then we would say that's positive influence. And I like to say that influence is a power like electricity or nuclear power, and it can be used for good or bad,
Hmm.
right? And so that's kind of the way that I would explain it.
Yeah, the always thing comes to mind, the car salesman or the timeshare salesman. It's like,
Well, timeshare, I loved you saying that you're held hostage,
yeah,
you know, because that is how it feels.
one of actually got real honest with us, and he told us our motto is make them buy or make them cry.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, and they have like, the tag team approach. So, oh, the manager just happens to be walking by at a certain,
Right. Like my manager is just back from lunch,
right.
Let me ask her. And then they come back. So sorry,
And
man.
we've had that with buying a car in the old days where you'd negotiate. He'd go up and talk to the sales manager, and then the phone would ring and he'd come up with a number. And then went back and forth.
I mean, it was like a play in three acts, right? But
It always
we
came back
we
to how much do you want to pay per month for your car? I was like, how much? I want to pay 20,000 for the car. Well, how much do you want to pay per month? They always trying to get you to finance it and make more
No,
money.
exactly, because they make money on that as well.
Right,
When I sold encyclopedias, we were taught things like, would you like delivery Thursday or Monday?
right.
Right? All these like, choice questions. And one of the things that we always had to prepare for, this was very long ago, Ted, because we were going door to door in the daytime. And, the little woman at home, which we dare not mention now, always said yes, or often said yes if you were, half good.
Yeah,
Then you get a call at night, my husband wants to cancel. So we'd always try to book appointments for most better in the evening when the husband was there.
right.
So they were both making the decision because you don't want cancellation. So, but anyway, so to answer that, I like to use the idea that it's a power and be very thoughtful and mindful about how you use it.
Hmm.
Because if you don't feel good about what you're selling, or influencing about, you're not going to be good at it for one thing.
Right.
And you're going to get a terrible feeling in your stomach whenever you try to do it. So make sure that you're okay with it. And I
So,
would say that it's positive influence.
so if I'm a salesman or a parent, how do I tell what one of the six types they are? Like I come up with a, new sales meeting, first time I meet with someone.
Well, the thing is that the first time shouldn't be the first time. Like what you should learn is to like warm them up and start the relationship before you even get there so
Hmm.
that you have some clue. Even when you're texting or emailing these days with someone, because a lot of people don't even like to talk on the phone, you can still get clues. Like someone will say, well, be sure that you have, backup information for the last 5 years.
Right.
Or I'm going to need to have a diagnosis. They use language like that just tip you off. Once you're, as I say, once you have that radar, it's not going to be difficult.
Yeah.
May I give you an example? If people here are in the corporate world, this is an example when you're number one, making presentations, and number two, to a group.
Hmm.
Because people often ask me, well, what happens if it's a group? I mean, how am I going to know? So, so here's what. So I was invited along with some other vendors to present, basically sell my influence program for a very, very large company.
Hmm.
And they had invited, I think, I don't know, 6 other vendors. This was in New York. And so I was invited 6 months prior to the date of the presentation, and they sent me this gigantic binder with sections of the criteria of what they wanted. And so when it came with my time, I created a binder in the similar colors. And so I handed it out. There was a 6 people sitting at a panel table like this, which is not uncommon. And they look mean, but they're not. This is just, their resting face.
Yeah.
And so I had 45 minutes. And I did something very unorthodox, but it paid off. I took 10 of my 45 minutes to, since I couldn't read the room, I just had walked in,
Yeah.
to help myself read the room by warming it up. And so I uh, hypothesized that the 6 people in the room were maybe not the committee that wrote that binder a few months before.
Hmm.
And in fact, it was such a big company, they probably weren't. Those other people may have moved on to somewhere in the company. So these were fresh people, and maybe they had different criteria in their heads.
Hmm.
And so I asked, let me just ask if you don't mind, because I'm going to be sharing a lot of information. What's your name and what's your department or function here at AT&T, as it was.
Right.
And so they answered, and one was budgeting, right? So I knew how to talk to him pretty much.
Hmm.
And there was somebody in IT, as I recall, and somebody else from HR, that you would expect, right? Because it was
Yeah.
going to be a big contract. And then I asked, what are your criteria for choosing a course? And they were at first a bit taken aback. They said, well, it's right there in the binder. I said, I know, but how many of you present? I mean, I was conducting a workshop. How
Yeah.
many of you had input into the binder? And only 2 or 3 of them raised their hands. So I was right. And so when I asked them, one of them said, well, it has to be very interactive. Now, of course, that was the HR person.
Sure.
What was good about that was I got to look at the rest of those other folks to see who agreed with her by nonverbals or disagreed with her, and also the pecking order, who looked up to who,
Ah,
right? So I got a lot in 10 minutes.
that's brilliant.
And I always teach that. So I still had 35 minutes, and what I had to say wasn't so brilliant. I mean, it was a course, right? And I had some benefits, I had slides. And so I was comfortably able to do it and still leave time for questions. But that first 10 minutes was so valuable because there were things when I started, I was emphasizing certain benefits that were said to be the main criteria of some of those people actually there.
Hmm.
So, I talked about budget and I looked straight at the person who said it has to be within budget or whatever.
Sure. Yeah,
Right. And I threw out, and this is the other thing. I think that learning this skills gives people confidence. And
yeah,
that's one of the benefits that, you just can't bottle it. You can't buy it because you have the confidence to know that if A doesn't work, you can always try B.
yeah,
So you don't have to fail as much. We're all going to fail, right?
yeah.
But it just like lowers your ratio, let's
I
say.
could see how you could have confidence if you knew you could go spend 10 minutes and ask a couple of questions and observe. You know exactly what to say to who. That's perfect.
Not so hard,
Yeah,
right? But a lot of people are so intimidated. And that's the other thing. Once they all start to talk, you see they're just regular people.
right.
One has a Brooklyn accent, whatever. And, they're just like people who have jobs, a job to do. And it does definitely warm up the room and you get to know their names.
Yeah,
And so, as I say, I threw out a whole section of what I was planning to present because it didn't seem important to anyone.
yeah. It's nothing worse than somebody coming in and giving you a presentation that's not relevant because they didn't do their
Right.
homework.
But how are you going to know?
Yeah,
Right? Because
right.
it was right there in my slides.
Yeah,
And so I think when we lack confidence, and I have done that, by the way, and full disclosure, I've done it for SMM.
hmm.
But bless their hearts, they liked me enough to book me again. Because the first time I ever spoke for them, I was nervous. And so I threw in the kitchen sink,
Hmm.
and it was information overload.
Yeah,
You have to learn just to be very elegant and economic in what you're teaching.
right. So this is stuff we'll go deeper in on the webinar and obviously in your course. So how can people get in touch with you to learn more about it? And then I'll definitely be messaging people about the webinar when we schedule it.
Okay, awesome. Well, my website, as you would expect, is called ezinfluence.com. That's letter Z influence.com. Maybe Ted can put it in the chat.
Hmm.
Or this is going to be elsewhere, so forget that, right?
I'll
Because
put it in the show notes. And
okay, and my email is EZ4U. That's letter Z, number 4, letter U, at easyinfluence.com.
awesome. Well, this has been great. I always learn so much when I talk with you. And
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the questions, and thank you for letting me ramble on from question one.
oh, I'm fascinated by all this. So, so
Wonderful. Any other questions at all?
No, let's wrap it up here. We'll, save it for the webinar and we'll go deeper. And if people want your course, they can get it on your website, right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend. It's been great. And I don't know how many minutes that was, but it flew by.
It
How
always
many?
does. The counter says 46, so
Oh, okay. That's a lot.
cool. Cool.
You're